Welcome to the Game of Life podcast, where we bring you inspiring softball stories, insightful tips from coaches and players, and explore how the game transcends its boundaries to become a metaphor for life. Whether you're a sports enthusiast, a casual fan, or someone just looking for inspiration, you're in for a treat. We'll unravel the tales that go beyond the scoreboard. Discover how perseverance and hard work on the field translates into resilience in your daily challenges. Learn about teamwork, leadership, and the unwavering spirit that fuels success, not just in sports, but in the game of life. Another week, another episode. Allie, it was great last week to actually be out in Chicago. Next week, we're going to be doing an episode together, like in person. Two of us, Richmond versus Richmond on the same screen.
Is it like a duel? What are we doing?
I don't know, like coach versus that. Well, no, you're a coach now. You're not an athlete anymore. You're retired.
That was rude.
Have you joined a beer league yet?
No, not yet, but I'm half marathon training, so that's something new.
Well, you know, before we talk about our topic, that's a great point. When I played golf and then I played on some mini tours, and then you get married, you get a job, you start having kids. I never lost my passion to want to pursue something with my energy. It just stopped being golf. You know, it was the putting green in the backyard, then it was coaching, and then it was running. And when you said that, it triggered the point that if you've gone your whole life pursuing something and putting your all and your effort and energy and passion into it, those traits actually transfer to just keep trying new things. So when you said your marathon training, if you would have told me 5 years ago you'd train for a marathon, I'm like, what?
Half marathon.
But that's that's the transformation. If you really are into the process over time, as you age and try new things and keep an open mind, how do I say it? It's not just softball. It's the process has to be some sort of mission and purpose to something else. So let's talk about communication tonight. What are your initial thoughts when you hear the word communication?
I think it makes or breaks a lot of different things in your life. I think, whether it be at your job, at school, at your sport, with your family, with your friends, communication, and it's just a buzzword that is thrown around so often. But tonight I want to dig into, how do you become a good communicator? Because it's not just something you wake up one day and say, all right, I'm going to communicate really well today. And it can start like that, but I think there's just specific traits that good communicators have, and I think that's something that's important to pay attention to in your life. The first one for me, I think the way you start, being a good communicator, if that's something you're trying to get better at, is asking yourself the question, first, how do I become more approachable? How do I open up myself to have conversation with people in good times and bad times? How do I become someone who people want to communicate with?
The most powerful thing you can do when there's a conflict or a concern or a meeting is to just sit there and listen until people say, well, what do you think? Because so many of it, I mean, we've all been guilty. You come into the room and you get started and everybody's got an agenda and you just start talking. And I feel like people listen to you more if you wait until they actually ask you.
Yeah, that's, as you always say, that's why we have 2 ears and one mouth. We're supposed to listen.
Do you think I feel communication also only because it's always an issue, but people start talking about it and using it as a buzzword after the problems have happened. Like,
yeah, we need to communicate better. That's our problem. We need to communicate.
By the time it gets to that point, that the symptom's not communication. Like there are other symptoms that lead to the communication, the neglect or whatever.
And I think you said it great too. Sorry to cut you off there. I just wanted to touch on something you said, but I think you said it great when you said part of it's listening too, right? Being a good communicator, the good communicators I've learned from and think about in my life are not the ones who talk the most. They're not the ones who just start every conversation and need to be the loudest in the room and talk. It's, how can you offer me helpful advice? right? If someone's going to come talk to me, I need to add value in some way. I'm not gonna go talk to someone when I have an issue or talk to someone when something's on my mind if I think they're just gonna start talking back at me and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, that sucks." Like, yeah, I know. That's not why I came to you. I'm looking for advice. I'm looking for you to be a sounding board. I'm looking for you to, help me through my problem, not say, "Oh, yeah, that's tough. I don't know what you're gonna do about that one."
Good
That's
luck.
probably my pet peeve when it comes to communication.
I learned a very valuable lesson back in college, in high school playing golf. Golfers like to talk, they don't really like to communicate. And so afterwards, after a round, it was a side joke with some of my friends in college. Everybody'd walk in the clubhouse. Hey, what'd you shoot? Oh my gosh, I hit one in the bushes on 7 and then the water on 16 and 3 putt at 18. And I should have had a 72, but I had a 78. So, and then the next person says, oh my gosh, I did this. They're just explaining why they shot what they shot. So my friends and I, teammates, we did an experiment where people would say, what'd you shoot? And I go, 75. That's all I'd say. And they'd be like, well, why? And I go, and my teammates go, well, I missed the putt for a 74. That's all we'd say. And I still use that when I started helping out with the high school golf team this fall. I after 9 green, I mean, I kind of know how the kids were doing around the course, but after 9, I'm like, oh, what'd you shoot? They never want to tell you their score. They want to tell you all the reasons they got to that score. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. That just what happened and let's deal with it. And I feel communication, the big thing is everybody's trying to justify their thoughts and opinions. They don't really listen to anybody else. Sorry
Yeah.
for the rant,
Yeah. No,
but I
and
think that's important.
something else too, I think sometimes when people get frustrated going into conversations, it's because they're not asking the right questions. If you go into a conversation and you're not asking the right questions, the conversation's not going to go in the direction you want it to. So just as important it is to say how you feel and what you want to say, ask questions in a way that's appealing to somebody else. Instead of saying, "What'd you shoot today? Hey, how'd it go for you today? How do you think you did?" That's completely different and will steer the conversation in a totally different way than saying, "Hey, what'd you shoot?" Right? So I think about that a lot sometimes, and I think that goes for softball too.
Well, that was my next
Instead
question.
of,
So after
"Hey,
softball game,
hey, were you?" Yeah. So instead of saying, "Hey, how'd you do today?" I was 0 for 3. "Hey, what was your approach like today? How'd you feel in the box? How'd your team do today? How'd you guys do? Are you trying to knock? What's happening there?" They're going to elaborate a lot more and it's going to help dictate that entire conversation instead of you saying, "Oh, how many plays did you make in the field today?" Totally different. Totally different.
how many productive at bats? Any barrels on the ball? Like, I mean, I'm probably being a little too specific now, but I think that would be different.
Yeah. How's the team working together? What are you guys working on? Those are good questions that are going to help you totally change the context of any conversation that you're in. Anytime.
Most communication, I think, starts with me, not me personally, but whoever's starting it, right?
Yeah.
Instead of asking those good questions. And you know, I
I
guess go ahead.
I was gonna say one thing that comes to mind for our family was that's a prime example of this is it's sometimes really hard to be a good communicator when you're not in a good place, when things are going bad, when you need to have a tough conversation. And I want to get into tough conversations in a minute. How do we communicate through those? But one thing we always did in my family was so my sister and I are about a year and a half apart. So naturally, we'd always butt heads. She's my best friend in the entire world. I would do anything for her, but we fight over the dumbest stuff. And if you have a sibling, you understand that. So we'd fight when we were younger and we'd get sent to our rooms or whatever, like siblings do. And my parents would come in and say, "Hey, living room right now." And we'd go sit there and we'd sit in a chair and face each other. And my mom or dad would say, "I want you to say 3 nice things about each other. Allie, you go first." So now instead of just accusing each other of what we did and doing all that, we're communicating in a different way. And we'd always joke, it would be the dumbest thing. She'd be like, "I like your eyebrows." And then we just start laughing. And then after that was all over, then we would unpack the situation that just happened. Because if you try to talk when you're angry, sometimes things can get out of hand really quick. We say things we don't mean. we don't listen well. Those are the times when instead of listening, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next. It doesn't even matter what you say to me. I'm thinking about point A, B, and C I want to make to why you're wrong.
Yeah, it's a very reactive conversation. And to me, when you start reacting, you're just pouring gasoline on a situation.
Hmm.
Uh, we also, I mean, we started this at a very young age. Anybody in our house could call a family meeting. And it could be during the football game I'm watching. It could be mom's show. You know, we didn't have the streaming back then, but the rule we had to draw. I mean, there could be like a 5 minute leeway, you know, if I'm out mowing the lawn or something, but we'd have a family meeting, but the person that called the meeting had to address it. You started the meeting off not with accusations, but with a problem that we need solved. And I think again, that's more proactive. Didn't always immediately solve the problem, but I think that was the communication that we're going to get through it. So those were two things we did, but I really feel both those items could be used on a sports team,
Hmm.
in a business setting, in a school setting, doing a project with people. I
Yeah.
mean, it's universal.
I think from a top-down perspective in terms of adult to child at that point too, it taught us how to handle tough conversations because they were not fun sometimes. Like all of us would go into family meetings being like, I think I'm the problem. We knew it was going to be targeted at one of us, and that was not easy, but you had to learn how to say, one, I'm sorry, two, hear the other person out and see where they're coming from and say, okay, maybe my intent in this situation did not match my impact. Because that's a huge thing too. Just because you meant to say something a certain way or you meant for something to come off a certain way, that's intent. That doesn't mean your impact matched what you were trying to do.
Yeah, intent versus impact is great. There's all sorts of examples. When we used to bring Cam F. Awesome, the US boxer, to our classroom to speak to schools, he'd tell a story like, you know, you're late for work, you get in your car, you're speeding, you go through a stop sign and you hit somebody and they're on the ground bleeding. You're like, oh my gosh, I was speeding, I was late for work. I didn't mean to hit you. I'm so sorry. Well, that's great. The intent wasn't to hit the person, but that person's on the side of the road bleeding. Like the impact of your poor choices,
Hmm.
right? It could be detrimental to someone else. And that's the same thing with communication. It's not
Mhm.
always about intent. It, it it's about how you come across and what the impact of what you're saying is.
And I think one of the biggest places that becomes an issue is a lot of times when we're venting or we say things out of anger, we're thinking of a perspective of me, 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 me. So our intent is, oh, I'm just venting. But your impact is you're lowering other people as you're venting. So I think that's where it gets tough and difficult conversations too, is well, my impact was just about me. I didn't mean any of that, so I don't know why you're so offended. Maybe because it still came out of your mouth and the other person doesn't know that you didn't mean that. So
So,
going into the next part I want to talk about too, in regard to tough conversations, is I think something that is so hard to do, seemingly hard to do, is being direct with how you actually feel. So in college, I learned this, and it was probably one of the best things I ever learned. If somebody said something to me in the moment that I felt was rude or I didn't understand their intent behind it, I would look at them and I'd say, hey, what do you mean by that? Because we just assume all the time. Someone says something to me, we immediately assume what they mean, we take it, and then we go talk to other people about it. And then it becomes a whole big issue. We see it on sports teams, you see it in several facets of your life. Instead of just right in the moment saying, "Hey, what do you mean by that? Let's talk more about that." And they'll say, "Oh my gosh, no, I meant this way." Boom, nipped it in the butt right there. And it is something that is so easy, yet so seemingly hard to do.
wait, so I'm not supposed to tweet it or post about it on Insta. I'm supposed to actually ask the person?
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
Hmm, interesting. Okay, well, you know what? I'm going to use that tomorrow. No, we've talked about this before.
Mhm.
We do the same thing with students, and I have players. You know, I had a player just the other day ask what I meant by something and how it
Mhm.
stands. And well, here's what I meant. Okay, great, thank you.
Mhm.
Let's keep this dialogue open. Uh, what do you mean by that? So powerful because uh, if you're saying something to another person that you don't know is true there's nothing good about somebody else, and it's not even useful. There's literally no point to sharing that except to try to build you up and lower somebody else, like you addressed earlier.
Yeah, and I'm a funny example is coming to mind that I'm just gonna use. I remember, I think it was my freshman year of college. I was home over the summer and we were hitting together at a field, and I hit like 4 home runs in a row. And you said, direct quote, you know what I'm gonna say? Oh my gosh, you would have never done that 2 years ago. And in my head, I'm like, that was so rude. And I'm like, what the heck, Dad? And he goes, no, no, no. I just mean like your swing is so much better. Like it's immaculate. And I'm like, oh, thanks. So that's a perfect example of we were on the same page. He was actually complimenting me in our own twisted way and just joking around, father daughter. But that's just one example that comes to mind that's funny. But if I didn't ask that, I could have been like, what the heck? He thinks I sucked. Like he thinks I sucked 3 years ago. No, he just thinks I'm better now.
I and that's important we talked about that, because I have been known to be the king of the backhanded compliment.
And sometimes I've needed it. I'm like, oh, okay.
But again, I'm a sarcastic person. I think I'm funny in a dad way. I mean,
Mhm.
people can be the judge of that, but when you say stuff like that, and that's not what you mean at all. And
Yeah.
but we know that. But if you didn't know that, that's where what do you mean by that comes in hand.
And it's easy to do when you're my dad. And I'm like, yo, that's rude. What the hell? But with other people, it might be more formally to start out, hey, what do you mean exactly? Can you elaborate on that point you just made? And it can be at work, it can be in your family, it can be at school, it could be to a teacher. Like that is a respectful thing to say to someone who's older than you, too. Because now you're not getting defensive. And the thing I've seen so many times happen is somebody says something and then they go talk to 12 other people about it, but not the person who said it. And now so many people are involved. And sometimes, right, another discussion needs to be had, but a lot of times it's over nothing. And now you have a person saying, well, that's not what I meant. And them saying, well, you said it. And now there's 2 people or 12 people. Now you got 6 on each side, creating a huge issue over something that could have been solved in the moment by you saying, I don't understand the point you just made.
And like I said earlier, it's so simple. Like, if you don't know what you're saying is true and it's not good about somebody and it's not useful, shouldn't you ask the person first?
Mhm. Yeah.
Now, that being said, I want to play devil's advocate a little. Is there ever an okay time to vent?
100%. You have to vent, especially in sports where you fail all the time or just in life. There have to be people you vent to, but at the same time, you have to be very choosy about who that is. For example, for me, a lot of times it was my family because I knew that they were going to say, Allie, you're going too far. Or Allie, one thing I appreciate about my family and my closest friends all the time, and this is something I try to do too, when I'm venting, they always play devil's advocate. And that's what I try to do. Instead of me just letting me dig myself deeper and deeper, they say, hey, well, have you thought about it this way? Hey, I know you said that, but what about this? And you can even say, I do this to people all the time. They're venting to me and I can tell that they're upset and I'm like, hey, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but XYZ. My sister and I do that all the time and it's actually helpful because I don't want to let someone sit there and vent to me for 30 minutes because I don't think you actually feel better after that. Like I've had somebody one time explain venting to me like throwing up. It doesn't it feels good afterward, but it doesn't feel good in the moment. I don't necessarily agree with that because I feel like
I don't
crap
either.
after I vent. I don't feel good about myself unless I somehow turn it around at the end and say, okay, I just vented, but here's what I'm gonna do now. And here's how I'm gonna fix what I'm venting about. Because if you just vent and there's no solution attached at the end, you just wasted your time.
Well, yeah, I think I have a really good analogy here, and I'm going to go with it, but you be
Okay.
the judge. If you have a balloon you're blowing up that's about to pop, you have to let some air out of the balloon, right?
Hmm.
But if you let all the balloon out, you don't have a balloon anymore that's worth
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
And it's drained, there's nothing left, and no goods come out of it. So it's okay to have a release valve,
Hmm.
but
Agreed.
it has to be capped. And we don't want to give your sister too much credit, but a couple episodes ago, she said, "Are you looking for sympathy and solutions?" I mean, that's part of the whole process too. There's a time to vent, and then there's time to move on.
And I think too, you have to be really careful about who you vent to because sometimes in the heat of the moment, you're surrounded by people that you probably shouldn't vent to because that's how a lot of problems spiral. I always had friends, especially in college, who had nothing to do with softball, nothing to do with Binghamton. They were totally impartial to my life for the most part because we were away from each other all the time. Perfect people to vent to because they have a bird's eye view of the situation that I cannot see clearly and they know me really well. Perfect example, I think.
Well, no, they have no stake in it because
Yeah.
I'm not saying you can't have a teammate or a close friend or a roommate that you play with or work with or go to school with. It doesn't have to just be sports. But at the end of the day, I don't know if it helps venting to someone that close, trying to do the same thing you're doing, trying to accomplish the same thing, trying to work towards the same thing.
Mhm.
That's a fine line. I don't know when the right time to do
But
that is,
that
but it's better to have somebody else.
and that goes back to communicating effectively though, because if you're on a team with someone you see every single day, there's a really fine line between venting and talking through something. So you have to kind of stay factual instead of, oh my gosh, so and so said this. I'm so mad about this. Everything sucks. Oh my God, poor me, poor me. Or, hey, this thing's really bothering our team. How are we going to fix it? That's factual information and not my opinion anymore.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
And it's also the kind of the golden rule of would I say what I'm saying right now to the person I'm talking about? That's so cheesy and we've all heard it before. But when you stick to factual information, it's much easier to say yes than when you're speaking your opinion. Because I know so many people who vent and they're like, yeah, I'd say this to the person's face. And in my head, I'm like, you would not say that if they were standing in front of you right now. I'm like, there is no way in hell you would say that if they were standing in front of you right now. And I think that's just a good check-in to have with yourself of is what I'm venting about factual so that we can work through it? Or is it just me being, over exaggerating, being a little bit dramatic?
So I think I have this categorized into steps from what we've talked about. Are you ready?
Okay. Yep.
So listen first,
Hmm.
be approachable, uh, try to understand the intent of what somebody's saying.
Hmm.
It's okay to play devil's advocate, focus on facts,
Hmm.
and at the end of the day, just learn to handle hard conversations.
Yeah.
What am I missing?
No, that's good. I think that last one is huge. Learn to handle hard conversations because that's going to serve you well in life. And I think it's something that everyone can get better at. And sometimes, as you get better at it, you teach other people how to be better at it. There's been times where, growing up, I was talking with my parents or someone else, and I would want to storm them out, and they're like, hey, 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 no, 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 we're good. Let's talk about it. They're totally taking the lead, pulling me in, but then that elevated me, so I can do that to someone else when they're saying, "Oh my God, I just don't want to talk about this anymore." No, 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 we're good. We're good. Let's work through it. Or if someone starts yelling at me and I'm like, "Hey, why are we yelling?" Instead of me yelling back, why are we yelling? Let's just have a conversation. We're good. We're good. Love you. Let's work through it. We're okay. So just being able to be that person to lead a hard conversation, one is going to help the conversations you have, and then two, it's going to help other people learn how to have them as well.
Oh, yeah, that's good. I mean, I don't think you have to overcomplicate it, but
Mm-mm.
it's like, and I think as a coach, what I see, this time of year, high school softball in New York, we're inside a lot, right?
Mm.
Everybody's like, oh my gosh, we're not going to be on the field. We haven't taken ground balls. We haven't done this. All right, well, what if we learn to compete in the gym every day and handle hard conversations and be honest with ourselves and condition ourselves and just compete? Is it really that big a deal when we go out onto the field? And I
Mhm.
think conversations, just like anything else, is a skill. You have to practice it.
And a great way to practice that, just like you said, is it practice? Because we've talked about conversations, hard conversations in life, but the one other one I want to touch on is to your teammates in practice. So either giving or receiving criticism, that can be really hard. But if one of your teammates is struggling and you can tangibly see why, sometimes your teammates can't see that. Like there have been times where I'm struggling and one of my teammates is like, "Hey, you just got to do this. You're good." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much." But it's the way that they said it. It's not, "What the frick are you doing? Keep your hands inside the ball, you idiot." If they come up to me like that, I'm gonna be like, Why are you talking to me like that? Now I don't want to listen to what you say, even if you were right." But if you come up and you're like, "Hey, Al, you're right on it. You're doing good. I noticed that your hands are not as inside the ball as they are at practice right now. So maybe like, if you just focus on that a little bit, you'll be solid." Totally
But but
different.
but think about it. If you didn't like the way they came across, couldn't you start the whole process differently by saying, "What do you mean by that?"
100%.
I mean,
100%.
again, if you don't understand it, then ask that question. That's almost the question to get you through tough conversations.
Yeah.
Because if someone's not helping you or communicating with you for the right reasons, what do you mean by that's really gonna show what their weaknesses with what they're trying to tell you.
Yeah. And the last thing I have too is I think a lot of times when you're trying to have tough conversations, what a lot of people will do is you ask a question, an open-ended question. "Hey, how are you feeling right now?" And someone will just sit there on the other end and not say anything. And then we'll start to fill space by just keep talking. And then it seems really one-sided because we don't like silence. One thing I've started doing or trying is, I say, "Hey, how are you feeling right now? Hey, what happened during the game today?" I do this when I coach. And I'm like, "Take your time, guys. I'll wait. I want you to think about your answer." And when you say "I'll wait" and they know that you're not going to answer until they have time to think about it and voice how they feel, that totally changes the dynamic of the conversation too, because they could have gone into it saying, "I'm not feeling great right now. I don't want to say anything." So I'm sure they'll just keep talking instead of, "All right, let me try to put together the words I'm actually feeling and get something out." But by you voicing that kind of kindness in the conversation and saying, "Hey, I just care about you a lot. I want to make sure you're doing okay. I could tell you were a little off today. So I just want you to know I'm here for you. Like, is everything okay?" And that totally opens the door instead of saying, "What was wrong with you today? Or what's going on?" So I think those are just two completely different questions too. Just the way that we word things.
No, this is great. Listen, as we wrap up, thank you again. I love these conversations with you.
Me too.
Uh, Next week, you're in town,
Mm-hmm.
and
New
I've got a
York.
special, yeah, I got a special place to record the podcast at. So I'm not
All
letting you
right.
know. I'm just taking you there. So uh,
Blindfolded or
no. You'll figure it out as we close in. It's not underground somewhere, and I'm not blindfolded. You don't have to look.
Okay.
So,
All
all
right.
right, Allie. Thank you. Until next time.
Thanks. See ya.